All right, your Florida Department of Financial Services, Florida Accountability Contracting System, facts, code validation tables, March 2014. All right, table of contents: contract type codes, contract status codes, method of procurement codes, recipient type codes, minority vendor codes, method of payment codes, non-price justification codes, budget amount type codes, change of commitment type codes, grant type codes, cost sharing codes, grant status codes, grantor type codes. All right, GA, contract type codes, code title and definition. GA, grant award agreements, not available to the fax online user. The recipient of the grant dollars by the reporting entity with either the federal or state financial assistance grant funding or another non-governmental entity. GD, grant distribution agreement not available on fax online user with expenditure of the funds of the catalog of federal domestic assistance number associated with the catalog state of financial assistance number associated with the grant form of grant from a local government or non-governmental entity to a recipient or subrecipient by grant reporting entity. All right, IA, Memorandum of Agreement, Understanding and Interagency Agreement. This is a two-party agreement where the terms may not be specified in law. The agreements are typically between government entities. Master Agreement, MA. This agreement is where the pricing is agreed upon, where the point of the execution, however, the services are not authorized to begin with a separate contractual document is issued, or i.e. task work order. MP, Multiple Agency Participation Agreement. This agreement is where the pricing agreed with upon point of the execution, however, the multiple agencies are allowed to receive the services being provided with the vendor would not separate the written agreement is needed for the participation agency. NO, no ceiling rate agreement. The agreement is for which the total contract obligation cannot be determined until the commodities for the service are delivered, such as the utility agreements and task discovered rate agreements. PO, purchase order, now available to sign the contracts in after December 31st, 13th, 2003, not available to fax online. User, the document is sent for the vendor's reporting entity for the purchaser for the commodities for the specific rate of the terms, vendor's acknowledgement, acceptance, delivery, and the service of the commodities. RA, revenue agreement, the revenue received for goods and services provided on the behalf of the government entities. SC, standard two-party agreement by statute. This is an agreement where the two parties agree on standard terms and conditions pursued to the applicable. TP, three or more party agreement. This arrangement is more than two parties agreed on standard terms and conditions pursuant to applicable laws. Contract status code A is active. Active agreement has not been reached with the expiration date. C, closed or expired agreement has reached its expiration date. D, deleted error of correction only, not available to fax online user. Removal of agreement data for the public view of the to the data entry error. E, extended agreement expiration date extended with the pursuant applicable state and statute and rule to be renewed. Are renewed. Agreement has been renewed pursuant to applicable statute of the rule. T, terminated agreement has been expenditure prior to the standard stated completion of the expiration date. Method of the procurement code description. C, competitive procurement code, or E for exemption code. Uh, 0. Exemption adoption placement services located by the DCF or Department of Children and Family Rule 68 1002 4J FAC exemption code. Code 1, exempt prospective assisted devices, exemption code, exempt legal services, including attorney, paralegal, expert witnesses, appraisal, mediator services. E for exemption code. Code number 3, exempt health services, including examination, diagnostic, treatment, prevention, medical consultant, administration. E, exemption code. 4, exempt services, personal, mental, physical disability, nonprofit corporations. E, exemption code. E, 5, code 5, exemption medical, Medicaid services. E, exemption code. Code 6, exemption facility placement. XE for exemption code. 7, exemption prevention services related to mental health, substances, child abuse, shelters, runaways, or by nonprofits. E, exemption code. 8, exemption training and education services. E, exemption code. And code number 10, exemption department citrus of advertising promotional items. E, exemption code. 11, lottery procurement. C for competitive code. Exemption standard specialized equipment devices technology including low vision, aid with a vision impaired person. E, exemption code. 14, lottery single source purchase, single source commodities or services exemption code. E, 15, code 15, lottery competitive solicitation. C, competitive. 16, lottery competitive quote. C, competitive. All right, method procurement codes continued. C for competitive. E for exemption. 17 lottery emergency purchase. E exemption. Lottery comparative cooperative agreement. C cooperative competitive. 19 exempt division blind service rehabilitation council blind services Z exemption. 20 exemption division blind diverse services rehabilitation council blind services E. 21 code settle agreement E exemption code. 22 exemption special contracts charitable youth organization Z exemption code. Code 23 exemption transportation disadvantage E exemption code. 24 exemption propane collected assessment propane and collected assessment deposited in general inspection trust fund are not subject to the procedures found in statute 287 057 with expenditure for these of the Florida state statutes. Exemption code 25 code description request of application method competitively awarding state federal grants nonprofits other grant government code and these competitive. Alright, Code 26, the DEP of the Division of Recreational Parks may be grant privileges, leases, concessions, permits for the use of the land with accommodation, visitor various parks, monuments, and memorials. Exemption Code 27, the DEP exemption, pre-approved site rehabilitation pro exemption. 28, DEP exemption, provided advance cleanup. Exemption Code 29, Code DEP exempt inland protection, trust fund reimbursement revenue contracts. The exemption code. DEP provided pre-approved site rehabilitation exemption. DEP pre-approved advanced cleanup exemption. DEP 29 code 29 DEP extension inland trust fund reimbursement review contract. C code 30 DEP inland trust fund petroleum cleanup participation program. E 31 D exempt inland trust fund yearly direct detention incentive program. E code 32 DEP state restoration funding assistance competitive. Alright, continue. Code 33, no cost for procurement exemption. 34, revenue generating procurement exemption. 35, lease having term of less than 120 consecutive days exemption. 36, state board administration, whether directly or incidentally related with this investment debt and the transaction exempt for the provisions of the Chapter 287 exemption. Code 37, less than 5,000 square feet privately owned facilities may be obtained via the quotes with competitive. Code 38, less than more than 5,000 square feet in privately owned facility must be obtained through competitive agreement. Competitive. 30 Code 39, same place replacement lease fair market price no negotiation competitive. Code 40, emergency lease exemption. 41, state-owned building lease for the Department of Management serve the competitive. 42 leases for the federal agency, state, local government entities exemption. 43 Code 43 is request for application method competitive awarding state federal grants and proper authorization competitive. 44 non-competitive award grants government entities, nonprofits, for-profit as corporations exemption. 45 dot exemption Florida Seaport Transportation Economic Development Fund exemption. 46 dot exemption Seaport Freight Mobility Planning DOT contracting award provided with a 334044 with any port listed in statute 311091. Any statutory authorized seaport section 311 114.2 for exemption code. Alright, Code 47, the dot exemption, additional authorization funding certain with the dredging project exemption. 48, dot exemption authority with its fund space Florida with the development and improvement of the aerospace facilities exemption. 49, Code exemption funding grants for the aviation airport programs project exemption. 50, Code exemption authority to acquire property as eminent domain exemption. 51, exemption 5511 traveler information system highway authorities public transit devices section 33460 exemption. Code 52, exemption contracts with counties, municipalities performing routine maintenance for work on state highways exemption. 53, exemption, F, exemption, emergency purchase exemption. 54, exemption, authority purchase surplus, property for the federal government exemption. 55, exemption, emergency repairs exemption. 56, exemption, construction, maintenance of lightning on poles and owned with electrical utility exemption. Code 57. Exemption, acquisition, lease, disposal, real personal property with a transportation purpose with exemption. 58. Exemption, acquisition, property right with limited access, services and facilities, exemption. 59. Exemption, placement, wireless facilities, turnpike property, exemption. 460. Exemption, Florida Highway Beautification Council, exemption. 62. Exemption, public transit service exemption. Continued 63. Exemption, state fund infrastructure bank loans credit enhancement construction improving highway transportation facility exemption. 64. Exemption, intermodal development program exemption. 65. Exemption, rail program exemption. 66. Exemption, rail funding exemption. 67. Exemption, acquisition big cypress national preserve exemption. 69. Exemption, small road county assistance program exemption. 70. Exemption, county incentive grant program incentive program exemption. 71. Exemption, small county outreach program exemption. 72. Exemption, transportation regional incentive program exemption. The 73. Exemption, ride sharing promotion programs exemption. 74. Exemption, federal aid grants, public transit, intercity bus services programs and projects exemption. 75. Exemption, public transit block grant and programs exemption. 75. Exemption, public transit block grant program exemption. 76. State public services announcement programs provided by the Florida State nonprofit corporations under 501c6 of this exemption. Internal Revenue Code without the document matched with at least $3 to 1. 77. Exempt health services including but not limited to substance abuse, mental health services involving examination, diagnostic treatment, prevention, and medical consultation when such services are offered to eligible individuals participating in a specific program qualifies. 78. DFS exemption, investment related services. 79. Exemption, relocation, utility facilities exemption. 9A. Exemption, federal state law prescribed by the agency must be conscribed. 9B. Repayments for the established during appropriation process. A. State term contract purchases without requests of the quotes from qualified vendors, competitives. B. State term contract purchase with requests for quotes and qualified vendors, competitive. Alternate contract source purchase made with the contracts led by the federal government and other state public subdivision commodities for contract services determined with the cost effective and best interest of the state. Competitive. D. State purchasing agreement. Competitive. E. Purchase under $2,500 exemption. F. Informal quoted purchase not exceeding category 2 request with quotes competitive. F1. Informal quote below bidding for threshold with the public property, publicly owned buildings over $100,000 competitive. Continued. G. Single source $2,500 or greater not exceeding category 2 exemption. H. Agency invitation bid competitive. H1. Agency invitation bid to public property, publicly owned buildings. C. H3. Invitation to bid competitive. I. Agency for proposal. Competitive. Agency request for proposal, public property, public owned buildings, competitive. IE 3. Agency request for proposal. J. Agency invitation negotiation, competitive. 3. J1. Agency invitation negotiation, public property, publicity. Owned buildings competitive. K. Agency negotiated after receiving fewer than 2 response offerings of competitive procurement. Competitive. L. Exempt services commodities providing with government agencies including contract, independent, nonprofit, college, or university with a state of exemption. M. Exempt purpose made for respect qualified nonprofit agency with blind or other service handicap exemption. N. Exemption for the purchase with the Pride Department of Correction Prison Industry Program exemption. O. Emergency procurement exemption. O1. Emergency purchase of the public property, publicly owned buildings exemption. O2. Emergency purchase of the public per government executive order. P. Single source of operative approval of category 2 exemption. Q. Consultants, competitive negotiation, competitive. R. Exempt CDH, CHG with accounting procurement standards. S. Exemptions, commodities purchase for the resale exemption. He. Exempt regulated utilities, government franchise, public communications exempt, long distance telecommunications services, and governmental franchise exemption. U. Exempt artistic services exempt. V. Exempt academic program review exemption. W1. Exempt lectures and individuals exempt. W2. Exempt contacting continuing education vendors expense paid for but collected fees exemption. X, exempt auditing services exempt. And Y, exempt payment of the membership dues exempt. Z, exempt professional examination exempt. Alright, code A, nonprofit recipient type codes. A, nonprofit organization. B, for profit organization, including sole proprietor. C, local government. D, statement community colleges. E, district school boards. F, state agencies excluding state universities. G, state universities. J, federal agencies. K, private universities. L, legislator means and these asterisk means in or out of state. Minority vendor codes. H for African American certified, N for African American non-certified, J for Asian American certified, P for Asian American non-certified, C for federal, A designated business, W for Florida veteran certified, Y for Florida veteran non-certified, I for Hispanic certified, O for Hispanic non-certified, D for minority business federal, and K for Native American certified, Q for Native American non-certified, A for non-minority, M for non-minority white woman not certified, AR for non-minority white woman non-certified, F for nonprofit organization, S for nonprofit minority board, U nonprofit minority community service, T for the nonprofit minority employees, G for not selected, E not selected, code Z not selected, code L not selected, code N, code 9 not selected, code V other nonprofit, B state Florida small business designation. 1. Fixed price lump sum of contract where the amount of the payment does not depend on the amount of the resource time and including single amount of the payment and paid completion of the contract paid with the percent completion basis the completion of all services with the completion of the task completion not defined task and milepost. 2. Fixed fee and unit rate of the cost per unit of the commodity of the service. 3. The advance of 100% advance state funds advance with the vendor based on the estimated cost of the reconciliation with the cost of conclusion of the contract. 4. Advance fixed price unit cost of the state funds advance by based on the estimated unit service of the cost, i.e. unit bed cost of the periodic reconciliation units provided before the conclusion of the contract. 5. Advance the fixed fee schedule with the state funds advance based on the estimates of the cost with the periodic reconciliation hourly service provided with the conclusion of the contract. 6. The advance of the cost of reimbursement of state funds advance based on the estimated cost incurred by building rent or hourly wage etc. with the periodic reconciliation incurred with the cost before the conclusion of the contract. 7. Cost reimbursement contract. Cost reimbursement is usually accurate estimated with the final cost cannot be determined usually with not exceed maximum. 8. Cost reimbursement plus fixed fees with including fixed price components. Contracts having large estimated contract costs accurate estimate with the final cost cannot be determined to be assured with the vendor profit. The fixed is awarded with the meeting of exceeding with the performance targets including cost savings. 9. Cost reimbursement plus percentage of the cost contracts paid with the fee with the right with the contract cost rate rises because of the contract type provided with the non-incentive of the contract or the contract cost is rarely utilized. 10. Cost reimbursement plus incentive fee for contracts having large estimated contract costs accurate with the final cost cannot be determined. Ensure the vendor flexible awarding with the meeting of the exceeding with the performance target including the cost agency cost savings. 11. Cost reimbursement plus award fee with the cost having the large estimated costs are accurate with the estimated final cost cannot be determined to be assured with the vendor fixed award with the meeting of the exceeding the preceding targets including any cost savings. 12. Revenue generation definition. Contracts result revenue with the agency based for the payment established for the agreement. 13. Code method description. No cost. Contracts result in no cost, no distribution to the agency. Alright, your non-price justification codes. 1. Price cannot be determined until the work has been completed. Interstate agreement to the work with the other state's price contact determined until the work has been completed. Rate is based on the formula specified in the contract. 2. The revenue generated agreement. Revenue vendors for the services are paid with the public with a percentage of the fees come to the agency through rate agreement, utilities agreement, and task order directly serve the rate agreed to the per hour service without the ceiling for the total cost. 4. Contract-wide consequence of the facts. Web application of the code for the slot selected with the contract-wide consequence. Yes. Radio buttons collected not available to fax. Online user available. Deliverable is contract-wide consequent without deliverable price. 5. Agreement without financial exchange for the impact date exchange arrangement for the memorandum. Do you understand the agreements without financial exchange for the impact? Code NR non-recurring, R RE recurring, changing amendment type codes, A amendment, E extension, R renewal, grant type codes, F for formula block grant, P for project grant, project federal state other entity grant, E for entitlement guarantee grant, C for competitive agreement, competitive agreements, D for discretion of federal state and other entity grants, cost sharing codes, F for federal government, L for local government, S for state of Florida, P for private nonprofit, private for profit or nonprofit, O for other state governments. A1 anticipated award, active anticipated award. A2 approved award, inactive approved award. IP property action, inactive pending property action. IR reporting inactive award for ongoing report. CD close map flare delete, and DD delete and not available on the online fax user delete error or correction map of the flare delete. Grantor type codes: A nonprofit organization, B for profit organization, including sole proprietor, C for local government, D for state community colleges, E for district school boards, F for state agency excluding the state university, G for state universities, J for federal agency, K for private universities, and L legislator. Means of the asterisk means in and out of state. And that was the reading of your Florida Department of Financial Services, Florida Accountable Contracting Tracking System or code validation tables.